Okay, I know I say it every week, but I say it every week because it's true. I'm really excited about this guest. As you know, all the guests I bring on, I'm excited about because I'm fans of, and the majority of them are wrestlers. And this one is indeed a wrestler, but it's a whole other ball game. In 1986, from 1986 to 1990, there was a little show on Saturday afternoons while I was in Long Island, New York, and it was called G.L.O.W. And it was the gorgeous ladies of wrestling. And I got to tell you, you talk about a show, especially a wrestling show, that was decades, and I mean decades, ahead of its time with campy storylines, singing pre-tapes, and to top it all off, the most gorgeous girls you would find on the face of the planet. And I'm not just talking about gorgeous wrestlers, I'm talking about gorgeous girls. So you can see how I was 26 years old at the time. I was a wrestling fan and I was completely hooked on this show. Now, there's no doubt about it. As my career went forward, and as you know, I had a part in the WWE and the writing of the Attitude Era, this show no doubt had a tremendous influence on me, in the late 90s. And keep in mind, it aired 10 years earlier, but that's the impact it had on me. This show has never been duplicated. There's never been another show like it as far as wrestling is concerned. And today I happen to have one of the stars of that show, the gorgeous ladies of wrestling. She went by the name of Little Egypt, and her name is Angelina Altashin. And Angelina, nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Thank you for having me on your show.
Listen, Angelina, I got to tell you this up front. Let's get this out of the way. I'm an old married man. I've been married 31 years old to the same woman. I know you've been married 20 plus years. I just got to tell you, you're more gorgeous now than you were back on that show in 1986.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Well,
I
you
do.
know
Thank
that. I
you.
don't need to tell you that. But listen, I want you to know, too, ahead of time. I'm going to mark out here. You got a total glow mark on your hands. I love this show. I've got so many questions I want to ask you from my perspective, not only as a fan, but as I went forward in my career in wrestling as a writer and a producer. So many things I want to ask you about the show, and I'm just thrilled to have you on the show.
Good. Let's get started. I'm so excited.
Let's get started. The first thing I want to talk about is before we even get to G.L.O.W.,
Okay.
you have such an extraordinary background that, by the time, you were 19, 20 years old, you had experienced so many things that people don't experience in an entire lifetime. And it all started, you were born in Virginia, your father's an Italian, and your mother is a first generation Turk. Can I ask you exactly what that means?
It means that when my dad was born American to two Italians, and he joined the service. He was stationed in Istanbul, and he met my mom there, and he was able to speak Turkish to her and convinced her that it was worth her while to come to the United States. And they had four kids, and I stayed a Navy brat. And my dad was in the service for over 20 years. He was a Master Chief Petty Officer, which is it's the highest ranking you can get as a civilian. He was E9. And so we were able to travel a lot. And as a kid, it's traumatic because you don't want to leave your friends. But when you look back as an adult, you realize just how blessed you were. So I was able to see a lot culturally and be very stimulated that way.
I got to ask you this question, and this is an absolute shoot. And, I was in the wrestling business for 23 years, and, I went all around the country, and I'll say country because outside of Canada, I've never left the country because I've always been afraid to. And I'm seeing here as you grew up, you born in Virginia, then you went to New Jersey, then you wound up going to Japan.
Yeah.
How old were you when you went to Japan, and what was that like?
Oh, I was in the third and the fourth grade, and let me tell you, Vince, being a kid in Japan is it's the best place on earth because the technology and their toys, the cartoons that you're watching on TV. When I got back to the United States, I actually went through withdrawals because the best we could find was maybe Speed Racer, and by that time I had already gotten absorbed in Majinga and all these like Transformer toys and Hello Kitty had just come out the year before, and I was a huge Hello Kitty fan. It took me 20 years to see her show up in the US. So do you see how far ahead like I was stimulated as a child? It was absolutely unheard of, like toys that would shoot rockets off, and I'm sure they probably would be outlawed in the United States, but they had the best toys, the best.
But now, if here's my question again, I'm an adult and I don't leave the country. Here you are, a second and third grader. You're going into a country, a classroom environment, a school where they speak Japanese. And you came from New Jersey. Obviously, you're speaking English. How does a second or third grader learn the Japanese language that quickly?
Oh, well, okay. So my dad was stationed in Japan. So we were on an American base and we had American schools. We were shipped from the base to the bigger bases where the schools were. And my mom was, you have to understand my mom was a Turkish movie star. And so she wanted to be out and absorb the culture. And she was a foodie before the word foodie even existed. And so she just threw us out there into the culture. I mean, we were eating the craziest things and started a food phobia that probably still is with me today because of the shock that I probably went through as a kid. But that was like, it was more like that. It was really fun. I learned a lot of different things, and we did have to learn a lot about the Japanese culture while we were there. But we were stationed there for 2 years, and then I came back, and my mom was putting sushi in my lunch pail in the fourth grade and sending me to school, and I was getting teased by the kids because they didn't understand why I was eating seaweed and they were making fun of my clothes. And so in the fourth grade I started dealing with a lot of teasing and bullying that continued on, and probably made me a stronger person, but probably not the best thing for children. I wouldn't want that to happen to my son, but it
Yeah,
did.
yeah. So now you go back and you finish your education in Las Vegas. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, again, cultural shock once again from Las Vegas. Once you graduate, now the family moves to Turkey. Am I
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah. How do you know all this? Like,
You
where did
got
you
to
get
be say at one point. I mean, seriously, listen. Let's be honest here. I know. Kids have to respect their parents, and kids have to love their parents, and kids have to go where their parents go. But at any point, moving you, like, I mean, again, from Jersey to Japan, then Vegas, now to Turkey. At any point do you say, Dad, Mom, what are we doing here?
Well, yeah, because when we came back, yeah, my mom takes us to Turkey. I end up living in Cyprus. I go from Cyprus to London, and then I finally tell my mom I can't keep doing this. I mean, I want to have some roots, and Las Vegas was the only home I actually knew, and so I left my family in Cyprus, and just my sister and I came back to the United States, back to Las Vegas, and I started working in a t-shirt shop at the age of 19, and that's when I was exposed to G.L.O.W.
But wasn't there a London stop in there as well?
Yeah, on my way from Cyprus to get to back to the United States, I went to England, which so I went through Europe, ended up in England, worked as a barmaid in a pub, and that was exciting. I lived in the pub, so I was working about 12 hours a day, living in the pub, just trying to make some money to get back to the United States. So that was one of the most exciting times of my life, being able to be independent in a country where I wasn't a citizen and I could have gotten deported at any time, but yet I'm in this pub, and the people coming in are becoming friends with me, and they're caring about me. And so when the bobbies would come in, that's the word for the cops, when they would come in, they'd kind of tuck me away, and it was just really sweet. And 20 years later I went back and I took my family to see the pub that I worked in. It was that impacting on my life. So Thank you for
Now,
asking about that. I don't get asked those questions a
well,
lot.
well, well, I want to ask you this too because this is important for who you are, and it's gonna come back later on in life. But in Turkey and now London as well, is this when you really started to study the cuisine and the foods of those countries?
Well, and actually no, my love for food started with my mom at my whole life. My mom was a first generation Turk. She loved the cuisine of her country. And so I was exposed my entire life to my mom having huge tables full of people, tables full of her Turkish and Mediterranean cuisine. When she wasn't exploring that, she was exploring Japanese cuisine. She was rolling sushi. She had us cutting vegetables. She always had us at the stove. You know, I loved it, and she would actually go to uh, places where she knew Armenians and Turks were in Las Vegas just with buckets of food to feed them because she just wanted to connect with people through food. I mean, so her love for food got rubbed off on me. I have a huge passion for food. And I do think that food tells a story. It tells a story of culture. It tells a story of who we are as a people and what we believe in and what we're embracing at that time. And you're getting me off on a tangent because you're talking about food, and that's like
That's
my
okay. No, that's fine. I'm interested. Hey,
oh
if it's
okay.
food, I'll talk about it.
So I absolutely have been exposed from my whole life. I've been exposed that way. I've exposed my son that way, and I honestly believe you can't have an open mind without having an open palate. That's new. I just did that. I coined that right now, right here on the
I love that. I
Lindsay
love that. Yeah,
Show.
and you better take that before I do.
Yeah. So, do you like food? Do you enjoy it?
Absolutely. Hey, I'm Italian. Both my parents were Italian. My grandparents were Italian. So trust me, when it comes to food, I'm a big fan.
So, let me ask you, Vince. Do you make a nice Sunday sauce?
Well, let's not get panicky. But
Or
listen, let's get back on track.
I
Now, okay,
have
so
the
now
best
now
meatballs.
you're 19. Now you're in Vegas. You're working at a t-shirt shop. Your family now is back in Turkey, correct?
Yeah.
So
My family's
so
back.
now there I would think there must be some stress involved because at this point, do you really know what you're going to do with the rest of your life?
Wow, you be going back so far, but you know what? I'm my husband. I met prior to moving to Turkey. I met him when I was 18. So when I came back at 19, my husband Mike and I were living together, and so I had a little bit of stability, but I definitely had no direction. I had ADD. I tried doing college. It was the worst experience. I couldn't remember a thing. I felt really stupid. It was like the teacher was talking, but I wasn't retaining the information. I'd look at the book, and I felt like I was reading the pages, but nothing was sticking. And so, it was pretty sad. It was pretty sad. So here I am, 19 years old. I'm in Vegas with my sister. I've got Mike that I've connected with, and I just knew I had to get to work, and I wasn't able to work in alcohol because I wasn't 21 yet. So I just started going to the mall and eventually got a job at a t-shirt store in the mall. 19.
So how does the glow thing come about? Now I know from what I understand, doing my research, from what I gather, there was a casting call for attractive young ladies, but they didn't specify exactly what it was for. Am I on the right track with that?
Okay, you are. There was a casting call in 1986 in Los Angeles to cast the first season of Glow, and there had to have been close to 80 women that actually got cast to go through the training with Mondo. Out of that cast, 35 came to the Riviera Hotel in Las Vegas. And it was towards the end of the first season where the girls were getting hurt and they didn't do another casting call. There wasn't time. So I think no one ever said this, but all of a sudden, some of the girls were coming in through word of mouth. One of the wrestlers would ask her friends to come in and audition. And for me, it was Mount Fiji. She came walking into the t-shirt store that I was working in, and that's how I got introduced.
Okay, so you weren't involved in that first casting call for the first season.
No, I was not, because those were the LA girls that came to Vegas, and then I met them because I was cast at the end of at the end of the first season. I was going through my training.
Okay, now let me ask you this. So Mount Fuji comes into the t-shirt shop, and we all know Mount Fuji was a mountain of a woman, a big woman. I think she was about 5'10". I mean, she looks like a wrestler. You know,
Yeah,
she comes in, she tells you about this wrestling show, this Glow. I have to think now, from what I've seen you, and I've seen a lot of your work on Glow. You
yeah,
know, you're a tiny, petite, model looking woman.
yeah.
What makes you think at this point that, hey, I can do this and I can train and I can go in that ring and become a wrestler?
Very good question. And that probably has to do with my upbringing because I didn't have the upbringing where it was a conventional household. I had a crazy Turkish mom who had no fear. She had no fear to leave her country. She had no fear to go to other countries. She wanted to embrace everything. And she saw her life as opportunities, like a series of opportunities. When she met my dad, it was an opportunity. When she wanted to experience something or see something, it was always an opportunity. And she always framed that for us. And she was fearless. She was really, really fearless. And so I think for me, what happened was when Fiji came walking into this t-shirt store, and Mount Fiji was 350 pounds. I mean, she's a massive woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I was smaller than I am now. So probably 20 pounds lighter than I am right now, very small. And she looked at me. She was so charismatic. She needed a t-shirt made. I was happy to make it for her. And I couldn't stop talking to her about, like, wow, what do you need this t-shirt for? What are you doing? And she's like, I'm a wrestler. I'm in a show at the Riviera. Have you ever heard of Glow? And I was like, no, we're filming at the Riviera. You should come down and try out. And I was like, no. My head's spinning right now, and I'm thinking she's going to eat me alive. She just wants me to come over so she can break me in two. And all this fear started like bubbling inside me. I mean, it was just like the girl standing next to me is like, I would never do that. You're crazy. But Fiji's looking at me right in the eye, and she's telling me, she goes, we're doing something special. We're the first all-female wrestling show that there's ever been. And you don't need to be folding t-shirts. You need to be coming with us. Our pay is amazing. You're going to be part of something special. And I was like, wow. Okay, so wow. I said, yeah, I'm going to do it. I am going to do it. And that started a shift in my mindset from, we're always given opportunities, and we have two choices with those opportunities. We can let the inner voice inside us talk us out of it. We can let that fear bubble to the surface. We can become stagnant in that choice so that the opportunity continues moving forward, and then you're not on it. That was the best decision I've ever made. I left the t-shirt store and I never looked back. And the girl
I have
standing next to me was still there. So,
I have to ask you this question because I've had the honor and the privilege with working with great females in the wrestling
yeah,
business, and I'm so thankful. But here's the deal. This is what I'm really interested in. The women I worked with in the wrestling business, and I think it's fair to say 90% of them, they wanted to be wrestlers. You know, Medusa wanted to be a wrestler. China wanted to be a wrestler. I can go up and down the list. Tara wanted to be a wrestler. Trish
yeah,
Stratus wanted to
yeah.
be a wrestler. Now, I would assume, and please, Angelina, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would assume even with that first casting call, and even in your case, first and foremost, I would have to think they're looking for attractive young women who really have no experience in wrestling. Is that correct?
Yeah, wrestling experience in wrestling would have been a plus, but it wasn't the focus. The focus. We were a character-driven show, and there was always some headbutting between Matt Simber, who was the director for 4 years, a creative genius, David McLean, who came from the wrestling world, who worked with the women that you were taught, you know, not necessarily China, but very familiar with female wrestling, you know, Moolah, Mae Young. He saw the women and he wanted to create G.L.O.W as a wrestling based show. Matt Simber wanted to create G.L.O.W as a completely entertainment based show. And there was this headbutting. And so I think I just really got lucky in the sense that I fit a profile and fell in love with the sport.
Well, but this is what I want to understand. Okay, I know, you know, you then I would assume you went to train with Mondo Guerrero, correct?
No, what happened was Mondo Guerrero was hired to train the women that were getting ready to come shoot the pilot in Las Vegas.
Okay.
And he was very disappointed. And I've spoken to Mondo about this later, but he was not. He just wasn't given the go ahead to come to Vegas. He thought he was going to come to Vegas. It didn't happen. And mostly, if you knew the dynamics of how this show, what was going on behind the scenes, it would make a lot of sense if you knew Matt Simber and how much control he wanted over the women. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yep. Yep.
And Mondo, you can fall in love with Mondo so quickly. I'm in love. I love Mondo, and I didn't even get to train with him, but I feel like the steps that he took to set up the drills that we were using when I got in were, you know, that was his footprint in the show, and it lasted all 4 years. And believe me, I'm sure that he would have loved to have been part of that, and it just wasn't going to happen because Matt wanted to control every aspect of that show, even to the point where he finally was able to take David McLean out of the show and then finish up the last 2 years.
But Angelina, Matt Simber, you know, and we're going to talk a lot about him. I've read a lot about him, but he couldn't have been the one training you. There would have had to be some kind of wrestling training with a trained professional wrestler, I would think. No?
So here's what happened. The girls that were trained by Mondo, some of the first trainers to arise out of the group that showed up to say, yeah, I can take what Mondo taught us and duplicate it. Americana and Royal Hawaiian were some of the first trainers. Debbie Dallas, who was known as the Killer Tomato and actually came from the wrestling world. She came in to replace Mondo in Las Vegas and eventually was cast as a character. But she was also giving us a chance to practice on her, where with Mondo we were learning storylines, we were learning bumps, we were learning selling, we were starting to get into some more intricate moves. And then Debbie Dallas, who took over the training as well in Las Vegas, we were able to, you know, practice on her, you know, pick her up, drop her, know what it feels like to be kicked by someone at that size, you know, being thrown by someone, but being thrown by another woman and taking bumps with another woman kind of changed the dynamic. So we figured it out. At the end of the day, Vince, we figured it out. Not perfectly, but enough to where we felt like we were presenting a wrestling match.
You know what's fascinating to me, you know, and maybe you could shed some light on this. From what I'm reading, you know, so many of the girls were non-wrestlers. They were attractive, beautiful women.
Yep.
I know firsthand in wrestling. I mean, and anybody knows this in firsthand in wrestling. You're going to get hurt if you're in that ring and you're afraid. That's when you're going to get hurt. I can't understand. I mean, this is fascinating to me because now not only, you know, were there so many girls, you know, who weren't wrestlers and were being trained to be wrestlers because they were pretty faces, but now they're being trained by other girls who really didn't have that much experience in the wrestling business, but somehow, some way, you girls are going through this process and you're becoming stars, which is fascinating to me. Did did a lot of girls drop like flies? In other words, for every girl that made it, how many girls would you say actually dropped out and never got there because the training got to be too much for them?
Oh my gosh. I in my own personal training, oh wow, I would say it was maybe 40 or 50% of the girls that would come into training would get far enough to get introduced to a character. And in the history of Glow, we've had over 60 characters that actually made it on screen. So it was like in my particular, when I was coming up, I was training with Amy the Farmer's Daughter. I was training with like there was a headhunter, I can't remember her name, but she ended up getting pregnant early, so she wasn't comfortable wrestling anymore, and that was a very smart decision on her part. And then there were some girls that took a few bumps and they were like, okay, this isn't for me, and they left. So it was really, really, really interesting. Really, really interesting. I wish I had the numbers on that, Vince. But what do you think about that now, knowing that like my trainer was Attaché? I don't know if you remember who she was or not. The little Marine, uh, feisty little Marine
Yeah, I
girl.
think I do. Yep.
Yeah, she was my trainer, and I learned, and she was, I just fell in love with her. And so that's, that these are our stories. I mean, it's a story that plays out over 4 seasons, and that doesn't even include the break from the majority of the girls leaving at season 2, and then a whole new cast coming in, and then it's just, can you just imagine, like,
I really can't, because I got to tell you, 95% of the women I worked with,
yeah,
and this is what I loved about them. I
okay,
think this is the quality I loved most about the female wrestlers. They all had this toughness in them where they really believed they could compete with the guys, and if push came to shove, they could take the guys. And they were, in Italian we'd call them tough broads, but they were really tough broads.
yeah.
That's why it amazes me that they were literally able to take so many attractive girls and turn them into wrestlers. And I got to tell you, when you watch the product on television, the product's believable. It's not like you girls couldn't work.
Yeah, you know what? I've never heard. Okay, so let's use that word tough broad, because at the cast of season 1 was mostly stunt women, actresses, girls looking to get over, have some work, some good solid work, have a chance to live in Las Vegas. They all came over from they all came and formed season 1 and season 2. Then there's this huge break, and then the next casting calls. Tell me if you agree with me. I'm just going to throw this out there, Vince. But the women that I've grown to learn and like learn more about and love on them seem to me that they were tough broads. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yes,
like
yes.
they were fearless to show up for the auditions, because now they knew what they were getting in for. And so most of the gullible girls like me who didn't really know what we were getting in for might not have gone to the casting call. But the girls that came in to do season 3 and 4, a lot of them were tougher. They were made from really solid material. What do you think? What's your thoughts on
Well,
that?
I'll tell you, here's what the big difference is, I think. And I think you girls are lucky. Listen, first you got to understand, I'm a big proponent of female wrestling, going all the way back to Glow. I love it.
Yay!
Here's the thing that you guys weren't faced with, and you're lucky. I don't need to tell you, and we're going to get into this too, because I'm very curious about a lot of things. On the WWE level, it's so political, it's disgusting. And there's a lot of the old school mentality with the male wrestlers that it's a man's world, and they don't like women wrestlers in the business to this day. And God forbid the women wrestlers get more over than the men wrestlers, then
Right.
they've really got a problem.
I
So
know.
with the women, it's almost like you have to have that toughness, because if you allow these guys to break you, you're absolutely done. Because keep in mind, they're vying for the same spot on television that a male counterpart or wrestler is. So
Yeah.
if those girls are in tough on that level and you ever see them break down or cry or something like that, forget it. Career
Yeah,
over. And
right.
you're lucky that,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's great with what you had
Yeah.
because you didn't have to deal with that as far as the other wrestlers on the show.
You
Correct?
are so right. And there was a time uh, when Glow was getting so big, we started doing the circuit. You know, we started doing the game shows. And are you there?
I'm here. Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I heard the beep and I thought, did I just lose Vince? There's a car alarm going off out there. So there
Okay.
was
Yeah.
a
That's
time
what it
when
is.
we
Go
were
ahead.
kind of going through the game show circuit, and there was we did an appearance on
Yep.
Family Feud. Do you remember? I don't know if you've seen
I
that.
saw that, and there's a little clip of it in the documentary.
Oh my God, Vince, the guys were so rude to our
Absolutely. Yeah.
girls.
Oh,
Oh my
why am I not
God.
surprised by that?
Oh my God. You think it was like, hey, we're all coming together, we're gonna do a fun show. And they were just, oh my God, they were just not very nice at all. I mean, there was just I heard the girls, and I'm not gonna mention names, but the girls that were lucky enough to be on that show were they didn't come out of there with a good feeling. Let's just say that.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah, and that doesn't surprise me at all. Hey, listen, I know stories in the WWE where girls would be over and literally they would be on the road working, and I mean I know stories literally where some of the guy wrestlers would drop a little surprise in their gym bag. That's how sickening and immature it is, and that's why you were in a healthy environment. Management is a different deal. When you're talking about people you're competing with, it's different. I want to ask you two questions.
Wow.
I watching the documentary, which I love. I've watched the documentary about 4 times. I tell everybody to watch the documentary,
You.
but it says there was really a sense of kayfabe within Glow where you had to call each other by your wrestling names outside of the building. The baby faces had to stay with the
Yeah.
babies, the heels with the baby. Here's my question to you. In wrestling, I mean, I always refer to it as the wrestling bubble. There are just certain things in wrestling you do a certain way that doesn't hold weight in the real world. My question to you is when it comes to kayfabe and babies staying with babies and heels with heels, again, there really wasn't the presence of these old time wrestlers to pass that tradition down to you. So if that presence wasn't there, where did that come from? Where you actually learn the ins and outs of the wrestling bubble, kayfabe, etc. Where did that education come from?
David McLean and Steve Blance, I'm going to put it right out there. Steve Blance, lead writer of our show, was the biggest mark you've ever met in your life. He knew the value of Mondo Guerrero training us. He knew the impact of an all-female wrestling show. He knew that he was part of something groundbreaking and exciting. He was always talking in my ear about the wrestling business, the industry, like what the significance of what we were doing. And my education came from Steve Blance. David McLean, because he came up in the wrestling world. And if you think about when David started and how passionate he is about wrestling, he kept that in there. And Matt Simber with kayfabe was just another. It was just another umbrella to have more control over the women by making sure that they weren't giving out any of our secrets. So that's what we were introduced to, and it did create a wonderful environment because we were hungry to learn. At the end of the day, when we got bit by the bug, we all got bit by the bug. The women that you saw on television that made it through the training, that were given characters, that embraced their characters, we were bit by the bug, and we started absorbing as much wrestling as we possibly could. We were watching the WWF at the time. We were just trying to mimic storylines, and we in our minds we were wrestlers. I mean, we loved the fact that we had vignettes and skits, and we loved that we were able to have another level that we could take our wrestling to in character development. But as far as that industry and feeling a part of the industry, we owe it all to David McLean and Steve Lance.
Now, Angelina, I have to ask you: are you, because again, you said at the beginning when you were working at the T-shirt shop, you were living with your boyfriend who later became your husband. Are
Yeah.
you married at this point?
Yes, and we've been married together over 30 years.
What does your husband think of this?
Oh my God. So, oh my gosh. Well, first of all, he thought I was probably crazy, but he's never stopped me from doing anything I've wanted to do, and that's why we're still together to this day. The whole point with G.L.O.W was that I was able to triple my weekly paycheck. Okay, I was making from $100 a week, I was making over $350 a week. So I was working one show day, and I had like 3 or 4 training days that we were using to build our matches as well. So I was working like a couple hours a day and a full day on Saturday.
I got
So
to ask you two questions that I don't want to lose track because some of them I don't have written down, but they're coming to me as you're asking me. I got to ask you a personal question because this is just interesting to me.
yeah.
Are there male groupies around
Where? Now?
during this period?
Oh God, yes. Oh
They're
my
all over
God.
the place. These male
Oh
groupies.
God. Here's my husband. He was a valet parker at the Golden Nugget, and all his friends were like, "Have Angelina introduce me to the California Doll. Can Angelina introduce me to Amy the Farmer's Daughter? Have them all come over to my house for a barbecue." It was always just inundated, and he actually liked it. It was fun for him. He did not see many matches. He did see the final match that I got hurt in. He thought it was a gimmick. He didn't even know that, like, did she really get hurt? So, yeah, we did. Now, imagine this, Vince. Our show, we did not charge admission because I think if you paid the audience to be there, then they all had to sign something and whatever. So, because they came in on their own free will, and it was such a fun thing that was going on in Las Vegas at the time, we had a queue of people that would line up for our show once a week. And sometimes it could be over 2,000 people in line on our studio. Our showroom that we were working in season 2 only sat maybe 300 or 400 people at the most.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of groupies. There's a lot of people that were running around the Riviera waiting to see one of us walk around. They knew where we ate, so they kind of looked to see where we were eating, and we always maintained kayfabe at that time. If I went up to the buffet to get something to eat and I saw Chainsaw and Spike, I wouldn't go say hi to him. We'd snarl at each other, and then I'd go find little Fiji or Olympia or somebody and sit over there. So that was the environment. The best part about what you call like a fan base was the kids. Oh my God, Vince, the elementary school all the way on up to 13, 14-year-olds that would be there with books for us to sign and just wanting to talk to us because they believed the storylines, and they just were so enamored by like the characters that we were portraying, and they were so frightened by some of them, and they were terrified, and it hit every level. That was the best part. I mean, we all talk about that the most fun part about connecting with the fans was the kids.
Now I got to ask you this: we talk about groupies. Are
Yeah.
you trying to tell me that Attila the Hun had groupies?
May I say, you should read the book. Queen Kong, Glittering Guts. I'll hopefully we'll post the link to it. It's the most tell-all book you've ever read about not just her life as a female wrestler, but her life as a dominatrix and all sorts of craziness.
Yeah.
So with Matilda the Hun, her character, because she wore her character with sex appeal. Like, she's like, I am the most beautiful big woman you've ever seen in your life, and you will idolize me and you will want me. And she walked around with that attitude, and she had followers. Let me tell you, to think about Matilda the Hun dominating you in a wrestling ring or having her sit on you in whatever fetish weird way, oh, she had her fans.
Yeah. Whatever floats your boat.
You asked.
I got to ask you an interesting question here. And I'm kind of going to rights and lefts here because every answer is opening up new alleyways for me.
Yeah.
How are you paid? Are you girls paid like they pay wrestlers as independent contractors, a per match basis,
Yep.
or are you getting paid like television stars, like actresses, because this really isn't of the wrestling world. It's really more of the television world. I'm just curious, how are you getting paid?
We were getting paid as independent contractors, and
Wow,
we
that
were paid
surprises
on a
me.
weekly basis, not a per match basis. So if I had 3 matches that week or 1 match that week, it was the same. What we wanted to do was have as many matches as possible because we wanted to be able to hang around. That was no one was looking to leave, so that was that we were always pushing ourselves to try and get into more and more matches. The We were not a member of SAG, so I'm not a SAG member. I don't pick up royalties, and I think they were able to get away with it because we were athletes and not actresses, and that's how they did it.
What about medical? I mean, what was that covered, or is that the same way as the independent contractors work? I mean, were they covering expenses if you got hurt in the ring?
Oh my God, yes, because
Okay.
again, we were under the umbrella of the Riviera Hotel. Our major funder was Mashula Rickless, who
Right.
owned the Riviera. He owned Fabergé, he owned Brute, and if we got hurt on property, okay, there was insurance, and we had workman's compensation, which actually paid us when we weren't working as well. But when the gig was over, the gig was over. It just didn't end. But they did take care of us. We had the best physical therapy you could ever imagine, and we couldn't wait to get back in the ring. So we worked really hard to try and tape up and strengthen ourselves so that we can take a few more bumps, so we can go a few more weeks and try and get our face out there on that screen.
Now, I have to ask you this question because, again, looking at the documentary, and we're going to talk a little bit about that later, but, where everybody puts Glow over, and obviously it was a great experience for everybody involved. And you girls clearly love each other.
Yeah.
But, some stories seep through a little bit that kind of like piqued my interest. I forget who said it, but somebody basically painted the picture of I would assume it was Matt Simber because he was really the guy in charge directing the show. It was his baby. He was a creative mind, but basically there was some stories told where management, and then you can be more specific, really didn't want you girls to have a life of your own, and they were very controlling. There was a curfew when it was time to get back to your rooms and lights out. Was there that controlling environment with the girls?
Yes, there was, and it didn't start out that way from day one. It was something that evolved as um, the girls started getting in trouble, maybe not showing up for training. Then certain uh, restrictions were put on us to make sure that we showed up for training. And imagine this, Vince. We are each season probably had an average of 35 girls at one time, and they're all in their 20s, and they're all amorous, and they're in Las Vegas, and they want to meet hot guys. Indy, no. I'm sorry. No.
That's okay. That's all right.
Indy, Indy, no. Come here. Indy, why did you do that, honey? I'm babysitting a dog. She's the cutest thing. Let me show you. Come here.
Let's see her.
Come here, Indy. She's a Staffordshire Terrier, and she's huge. Look at her.
Oh my gosh, beautiful.
She is so sweet.
Let's
My
get her
dog
into
passed away in
business.
January, so I really like the dog energy in the house, and she's just protecting us when you hear her bark like that. So, okay, curfews, right? So we're talking about like the restrictions on life. Season one, we did not have nearly as many restrictions as the season 3 and 4 girls had, because they had to implement restrictions as we went along. So as the girls started screwing up, as they started partying hard, then they started getting fined, or they would lose appearances, and certain things would be happening. Matt had to do it. He could have done it more tactfully, but I get it. I get why he did it, because I'm in my late 40s now, and I would have done the same thing. I would have been like, all bets are off. You want to be on this show, you want to have matches, and you're not showing up for training, then you're going to put the girl that you're working with in jeopardy. Like, there's a chance now she's going to get hurt because you're not taking your job seriously. So, yeah, and the big fines didn't start happening till later. I mean, then Matt started getting like ridiculous towards the end. Yeah.
But let me ask you this, Angelina. Were the girls really doing anything that bad, or was Matt maybe getting a little bit more controlling with the more popular the brand came? Because like you said, listen, these girls are all in their 20s. You know what comes with that territory. Now, if there were a big incident or somebody got arrested or somebody got busted or something, I mean, I totally understand that.
Yeah.
I mean, what was it, a lot of, high school hijinks, or was he becoming more controlling as you girls became more and more popular?
Okay, yeah. One of the things, the whole sequestering made uh, made us not understand just like how we were going over big time with our fan base. And interesting enough that you should say that, because I'm kind of torn myself because I was in that environment. And so I know what it was like to be sequestered. I know what it was like to be in, but again, I'm a Navy brat, right? So I got a military dad. So it kind of, I never got it personally. I never got in trouble. Maybe I'm a real baby face, like maybe
Yeah,
like
right.
someone says, show up at 8 o'clock. I'm going to show up at 8 o'clock. They say, don't break character in public. Don't break character in public. Don't get arrested, things like that. But at the end of the day, what was continued, and I think this is the answer that you're looking for, it was really clear to all of us girls that it wasn't about us, it was about the show. That it wasn't the girls that made it great. That was drilled in us. Like, it's not about your character. You're not that big. You can be replaced. People will continue to watch this show with you or without you. We don't need you. So pay attention, do what you're supposed to be doing, or you're out of here.
So it was definitely, which is different from the WWE, because, and again, I say this all the time. It's such an individualized sport because that's the way it was set up at the beginning with independent contractors. Everybody's competing against each other. That's why you never have a team atmosphere. But it's fair to say with G.L.O.W, you felt there was this team atmosphere with the girls.
Oh yeah, because we saw ourselves, and let's talk about that team atmosphere. We saw ourselves as players, and not everyone got to be on the field. So we spent our time trying to get on the field. Do you want to be first string? Do you want to be second string? Do you want to be a bench warmer? Like, where, that was our choice based on what we were bringing to the table and how fast we could go over with the audience. So I get exactly what you're saying, and I never heard it said to me that way, but it was a team sport. It was a team sport. Now, that's not saying, Vince, that girls weren't using their prowess, I think that's the word, or like their power of influence to get themselves more airtime. You know, that was going everywhere. And since I wasn't going to play that game, I just showed up. I put my head down. I wasn't targeted. And there were some girls that wanted more airtime. They wanted vignettes, and they were willing to do whatever it takes to get that time. And I'm not saying that that's wrong. It's just the game that I wasn't willing to play. So.
Let me ask you this question. I'm a huge Beatles fan. And I know in their popularity, John Lennon was married, but he had to keep it a secret, and the Beatles couldn't talk about John being married. There
Yeah.
was nothing like that with you girls. I mean, like, was it cool for you guys to be married, or I mean, did they frown upon that? The only reason I'm asking, because I'm trying to understand the level of controlling, but I mean, it was cool for you. They didn't want you to have this facade. Nobody was married. You were all single girls. Did that ever come into play?
Uh, the only time it really came into play, and I'm telling you firsthand, Matilda was married at the time we were shooting I was with Matilda. I probably wrestled Matilda more than any other wrestler. And her husband and her were an incredible team, but he was not allowed to be around a lot, you know? He could take pictures every now and Matilda wanted him around more, but Matt didn't want him around. He just did not want guys around the girls. He just did not want that to
That's
happen.
up. That yeah, I got to ask you though, Angeline. That's a little strange. How do you take that? I mean that's just a little strange to me.
Well, I don't know. I think that it is strange in that dynamic, and I am not going to defend Matt or prosecute. I'm just going to just
Mhm.
frankly just tell you what my personal experience was. And women could be manipulated into, into
Mm.
different things. I mean, we were impressionable young ladies. And Matt did not do it, did not run his show maybe the way that I think it would have been healthier for us because frankly I didn't appreciate the yelling. I didn't appreciate the controlling, not being able to have a lot of freedom. I get what you're saying, Vince, and I don't know how to answer that
Can I
frankly.
can I ask you a question? And listen, you got to understand something, Angelina. Listen, Vince. I'm not the guy. I don't look for dirt in these interviews.
Yeah.
I'm asking you these questions because I'm interested because I've worked with so many women. I never in my wildest dreams with head writer. I produced all the girls. I produced all the pre-tapes. I wasn't Vince McMahon, but my job was to produce all the girls. I never in my wildest dreams would have yelled at any wrestler, period.
Ah,
Whether they were a guy, whether they were a girl, to me, that would have been very disrespectful. So, like,
yeah.
I can't even imagine yelling at a knockout or yelling at a diva. Me, I can't even imagine it. So, like, my honest question to you is like, what is he yelling about? Just he
Oh
doesn't
my
like the way you're
God.
doing a
Okay,
pre-tape. I'm just curious.
so there were some girls that really got under Matt's skin. I mean, like they had targets on their back because they would roll their eyes and they would talk back. And it's like, this is a madman. Why would you give him that ammunition? Just sit there and be quiet, let him tell you what he wants from you, and then get the hell out as soon as possible. That was my strategy. Like that was like my strategy. But then some girls are like, I don't think you should, and they like provoke him, right? And you provoke a madman, and who's very good, has extremely good skills, vocabulary skills, and he knows how to get into your head, and he needs and just bring you down. Like he could make girls cry. Okay. And honestly, there were times where we would be sitting after we filmed, we would have like a debriefing where he would basically rant about everything that went wrong, right? And where he wants it to go next week. And some girls would get defensive. Like that's so stupid, but they would get defensive with him, and then he would just explode on them and just tear them to pieces and ridicule them, which is so wrong on so many levels. No one needs to be ridiculed. No human being should ever be ridiculed. But he could ridicule you and he could bring you down and just make you feel like you're worth nothing. You're not, you're,
I hate to say this, Angelina, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds to me like you're describing a bully.
yeah, yeah. Okay. So yeah, I'm definitely saying that my time in Glow, I watched a lot of girls get bullied
Mm.
and a lot of girls weren't bullied.
Hmm.
And that was he did pick favorites. Sorry,
Yeah.
he and I wasn't a favorite. I knew who the favorites were, and I knew who had targets on their back, and I knew that he was having relationships with some of them, and so I mean, so somehow women could touch his heart some other ways. Somehow, uh, you could touch his heart by just being so exceptional. Oh, I can tell you some of his favorites were Palestina.
Hmm.
He absolutely thought she was one of the most talented, character wrestlers he's ever seen. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yes, I do. Yes, yes.
She was amazing. And Chainsaw and Spike and the housewife gimmick and Mount Fiji because of her presence on camera and the way she was able to, finish these huge storylines. So that, those were, he wouldn't even dream of, you know, screwing around with something that was working. And if it wasn't working, he only had one method of operation to fix it, and it was unhealthy. And it did scar the women, and it wasn't, it was something. So let me just take a step back, Vince. When season two left to leave with David McLean to do the POW tour,
Hmm.
that was the number one reason the majority of the women left, was because they wanted to be treated better and they wanted to be taken serious as wrestlers. And we had a chance to go on tour and be in front of live audiences and work as wrestlers and get to be with David, who never did that. Like he didn't. He was one of. You could say he was one of the girls. He had our backs. He was always like. Um, there for us. We could talk to him about anything. He'd listen. And I'm not saying that there was one good and one bad, but I left the Glow show for that reason, because I was like, you know what? I'm over it. I'm done being on TV. This is not where I'm going to be. I got hurt at the end of season 2, and like I just saw my clock. It was just ticking. I had an expiration date, and I didn't want to be kicked to the curb, because I knew it was
Yeah.
coming. Like, this is it. I'm only going to be able to take a few more bumps. There's no way that they're going to continue to work me in the show. I have a chance to go on tour with all my sisters that I have this huge loving relationship for, and be with them just to see where it was going to take me, and I did. And then they had to recast an entire third and fourth season because of that.
Angelina, I want to understand this from somebody that was there. And believe it or not, you're going to find this fascinating. I actually had a meeting with David McLean once. So I actually got to meet the guy and I had a meeting with him. But I want to understand how this worked. And I also want to understand if this was like, visual and it was seen in public and the girls knew what was going on. From what I understand, David McLean, Glow was his brainchild. He was the wrestling fan. He loved wrestling, which explained why he treated you female wrestlers with respect. That makes sense to me. From what I understand too, maybe he wanted a more serious product than the campy product that we saw on air. But he was the idea guy. He came up with the concept in Glow. He didn't have the money. He needed the money for this to take off, and he found the money by teaming up with Matt Simber, who was a Hollywood director at the time, and he had cash. And Matt's idea was to make, from what I understand, make the product more campy, the product that you saw on television. Now, early on, it seems to me that, David McLean and Matt Simber butted heads from the start, but David McLean knew that he could not continue this Glow company, without the money of Simber and also without the money of Rickless, who owned the Riviera Hotel where you guys held your show. And
Right.
it was only a matter of time, I guess, before McLean, and I didn't realize it was this early, but basically a year later in 1987, McLean left and it was Simber's baby. I guess my question is, did all that play out in front of the girls? Was it that clear cut that, McLean really didn't want to work with Simber, but he needed the investment? And then once Simber came aboard with his money, he kind of took over. I mean, could the girls see this happening? Am I on the right track here?
You were so close, except for the fact that Rickless was the financial backer. And for David to get the funds necessary, Rickless was going to bring in his best friend, Matt Simber, who was
Okay.
this legendary Hollywood director, to have this amazing gig at his hotel. I mean, that all came Rickless and Matt. It was Rickless's money and Matt's job. Rickless hired Matt to work as the director on Glow. David couldn't get could not get Rickless to come on board without that happening. And so that was a concession that David McLean made. Now, there's a lot to be said about Matt's vision and David's vision, and there was a lot to be said about, as much as there was a lot of behind closed doors discussions regarding this, you could feel the energy was there. There were whispers about what was happening, and then finally it came to the girl. Actually, David leaving the G.L.O.W show wasn't a surprise. When the girls started rallying towards David, that was a huge surprise, because I wasn't initially asked by David to join the POW tour, because I don't think he wanted to go after each of us. So it was like that. He wanted the girls to come to him. And I remember, I think it was the California Doll. Her and I were really, really close friends. And she was like, I'm going to be going with David, because Amy was dating David at the time. Amy, the farmer's daughter, and David were in a very serious relationship. And so they were going to go do the POW tour, and Doll said, you should come with us. This could be great for you, and we'll be in front of a live audience. And David promises to get us, into magazines. We're going to have a POW show, and we're going to take G.L.O.W. We're going to take this show up a notch.
Wait,
And
Angelina, I hate to interrupt you there, but I just want to understand. So now, it's kind of breaking down between McLean and Cimber, and now McLean is kind of taking some of the girls and going out on his own with a new promotion. And does Cimber know this is going on? And I mean, I gotta imagine at that point it's almost World War III in G.L.O.W, no?
yeah, I'll tell you what, every girl left except for Mount Fiji, because she was in love with Matt Cimber, and she's very loyal. She's a former Olympic athlete. She's a team player. She's in it all the way. So she was not going anywhere. Also, Nanuchka stayed because her mother was making all the costumes for the show. And she was on board with helping to design those costumes. She wasn't going anywhere. And then a lot of girls came back to G.L.O.W in season 3 and 4, but they had no intention. Like Hollywood, when she left season 2, she did not want to come back and do G.L.O.W. She got a very lucrative contract after the whole season followed David McLean. They worked a really good deal with Hollywood for her to stay for season 3 and 4. And then I think as I go through it, there was very few. I think there was about 4 girls that continued to stay in and out of season 3 and 4. So I don't know. World War III, it happened at the end of season 2. It happened on a break. So it's not like it wasn't like the cast left Matt Cimber high and dry. He had the entire summer to recast that show, and he did. He did fast.
I gotta say, man, when you hear the story, you kind of really feel bad for David McLean. But then on the other side of the coin, I mean, I would think before he went into business with Cimber and Rickless that he would have protected himself a little bit more contractually. I mean, it just seemed like he got everything taken away from him from right under his nose. And if he would have been a little bit more protected, I think it would have been a little bit more difficult for them to do that.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Did you say you talked to David McLean? What did
Yes,
he say?
I did. I had a meeting with, listen, you're going to crack up. And if you go to my website in a couple of days, you're going to be able to see it. I
Wait, did
love
you just
G.L.O.W.
interview him?
What's that?
Did you just interview him?
No, I had a business discussion with him.
Oh, how did that go? Tell me about it. What's going on? It's the WoW promotion? What?
This is 2002.
Oh, okay. All right.
WCW is over.
Uh-huh.
I'm a massive G.L.O.W fan. I'm a massive female wrestling fan, right?
Okay.
I come up with this concept of a show called Bitch Slap. And it's really the G.L.O.W show, but with like cutting edge, R-rated female characters. And what happened was I met with David McLean. I wanted to see if he was interested. Now I can understand going through all that why he wasn't. But
Yeah.
we had a we did the treatment, we had all the characters and everything. We brought it to Direct TV because we wanted it to be on pay-per-view every week, long before TNA.
Wow.
Direct TV loved it. They wanted to do the show. I didn't have a clue in the world of how to finance the show. I don't like to gamble with other people's money.
Right.
So
Yeah.
like I didn't know how to make this show happen, but I got to meet David McLean, have a meeting with him over that. But
Did you ask
interesting.
him any of these questions? Clearly,
No,
they're burning.
I didn't want to. I see. I could be the mark with you, because hey, I couldn't be a mark with him at the time. I want
Oh,
to ask you. I want to ask you two more questions, and then we're going to kind of move on. Two questions I want to ask you. Number one, Steve Blanchy. That's how you say it, right?
I think it's Steve Blance. Like,
Blanche,
pretend you're
Blanche.
French. Blance.
That's French is hard for an Italian to announce. But anyway, Steve Blanche was the head writer. Did
Yes.
you girls have any say so in the storylines and the vignettes and the pre-tapes, or did the writers pretty much tell you what to do and you kind of did whatever they said? I mean, did you speak up? Did you have some input, or was it on a per shot basis?
Okay, so originally, when the season one girls were cast, most of them wrote their own raps. So a lot of people don't know that.
Interesting.
Steve Blance wrote my rap. I frankly am not skilled at rapping, so he wrote my rap. And he would write anyone's rap that needed help in writing a rap. But girls were allowed to put their input in first and like pitch something. Here's what I would like my rap to be. But the vignettes, which were the one-line funnies, that could be the coffee shop, tips from Tina, letters from Ashley, all that stuff, all the stuff that we did in vignettes were all written, and we shot them all in one day.
Okay.
Like we would because we would get in hair and makeup, and that's quite a lot to do, especially when you think about the intricacy of what Chainsaw and Spike had to do and just wearing all that makeup and glitter. So they would do as much of that as possible in like one shoot day. So that we had to memorize our lines when we were given our lines for our vignettes, but we were allowed to have creative input, and we were allowed when we were given our matches, like Vince, they would say, okay, so Egypt, you're in a tag match with Little Fiji, and Matilda's going to win by, I don't know, default or something like that. I mean, they would just tell us what it was. And we would work all week at creating the storyline together. So it's not like.
When you talk about storyline, because that was my next question to you. When you talk about storyline, are you talking about the actual laying out of the match?
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm talking about.
So the girls laid out their matches then.
Yes, we did.
That's great.
Yeah. Yeah, that was all us. I mean, frankly, with such a small skeleton crew of just Matt and Steve and David and couple camera guys, one day a week, we were bringing it all to the table, how we wanted it to play out. There was a match that was pulled from the show. It was a singles match that I did with Palestina. It was like my favorite match. We worked so hard on that. We had sticks and bottle breaking. I was cracking chairs on her back, and it was like 20 minutes of full on, awesome fighting to the death. It was like a duel of the desert death match or something was going on. And they pulled it because when Matt saw it, he thought little Egypt was going over bigger than he wanted her to go, and that was taking away the mystique of Palestina. She had a certain mystique about her that you didn't know what she was going to do, and she showed too much vulnerability in that match. So a match like that could get pulled after it was developed and performed. Matt never showed up to rehearsals. It wasn't like, here's how we're going to do the whole match, Matt. What do you think? It was like he was seeing it for the first time, and then he was making his assessments, like his debriefing, you could call it, at the end of the show, and saying what he liked and what he didn't like, and then we had to keep improving it from there. There wasn't a lot of time invested in
that's just real interesting because Matt's not a wrestler and Matt doesn't have a wrestling background, and I just find it hard to believe without that wrestling presence there, and your girls are laying out the matches yourself. I mean, you understand now fully. Did Matt really understand the psychology of a wrestling match?
No, I don't know about that. I know that he understood the psychology of entertainment. He
Right.
understood the psychology of good versus evil, and he understood character development probably better than anybody I've seen in the industry now. And that's saying a lot because there has never been an explosion of characters as vibrant as the Glow characters were in female wrestling, and you can even say maybe in wrestling altogether. I mean, it
Mhm.
just we exploded in that field. Like, I mean, if we may have had see-through storylines, Vince, we may not have been technically ambitious, we may not have been technically really well trained, and you could see us evolving in the show as weeks progressed and we got a little bit better each time. But what we did bring to the table were solid characters that people bought into, that and they bought into the good versus evil, and it stuck like glue. And at the end of the day, it's not about the how or the what, it's about the why. It's about the belief that someone has about that character. And if I I spend a lot of time like as a trainer and a coach, and I like to mentor not just female wrestlers, but I like to talk to all wrestlers that are coming up in the industry about character development. Because if you can get your mind around the belief, if you can get your audience to believe your character, it doesn't matter about how you wrestle or who you're wrestling or the technical components of a match. If someone's watching you and they don't believe in your character, you blew it as far as I'm concerned. There is no storyline. You shot all the holes that you could possibly shoot through it, but you have a really strong character and the audience has a belief in that character, you've gone over. You're over. Everything else is gravy at that point. What are your thoughts on that, Vince?
Oh my God! Please, you were just cutting an infomercial for Vince Russo. I battle that my entire life. Where, yeah, this is the way I look at it, and I'm not going to be long winded because I want to hear you talk, not me. This is the way I look at it. There are generations of
Right.
wrestlers, and there are the old school wrestlers that got brought up on the wrestling business that loved wrestling and understood it for what it was, and it was characters and it was storylines and it was pageantry, and you had stars that were bigger than life. That's the land that David McLean grew up in. That's the
Right.
land that Vince
Right.
Russo grew up in.
Uh-huh.
The generation now, they didn't grow up in that world. They grew up playing video games.
Yeah.
And when they were playing wrestling video games, they wanted to become wrestlers. So from that point on, they wanted to emulate what they saw happening in the ring in these wrestling games. So now, all of a sudden, every match is a spot fest. They have to memorize 50 different moves in a match.
I
The
know.
minute they start doing that, the first thing that goes out the window is the character. They
Exactly.
forget the character, they forget who they're supposed to
Yeah.
be. How would that character react? How would that character sell the spot? Because they're so fixed on remembering the spot. Once your character goes out the window and you don't care about the character, you are dead and will never get over. End of story. People can debate that all time. I can sit here and list with you 100 great technical wrestlers that never got over because they didn't have a character. You girls were brought into the wrestling business as non-workers, and you all got over based on character and story. If that doesn't tell everybody everything they need to know, I don't know what else to say about it.
And it's interesting because if you look at the when someone has a belief in a character, they're not making that, it's a nonverbal form of communication that a character has with the audience. It
Mm-hmm.
has verbal communication and verbal trying to convince someone through verbal actions is never going to work as well as connecting with your audience through nonverbal communication. So, how do you do that? Like, what's the best way to create belief in a character? Is one, you better believe you're that character, because people through their nonverbal part of their brain have to believe that you are who you say you are. And so that means you got to live and breathe your character, and you have to live and breathe what you're doing. So I lived and breathed that I was Little Egypt. It was a natural fit. I had my mom was Turkish, and I just kind of rolled with it, and I kind of married that character, and I'm still to this day Little Egypt. If you ask anyone, I mean, I love it. Also, you have to create a character that um, has a story to tell. Does that make you know what I'm talking about? Like you have to have a
Absolutely.
story to tell. Like not only do they have to believe that I'm Egyptian or that I have Mediterranean roots, they're believing that I'm a baby face. They've got to believe that I have a story to tell. And what's that story that I'm telling? Who am I as a character? That's all nonverbal communication. And somehow along the line we forget that. Like you're right, Vince. Most people think it's about how far you can get off the third rope, or one big extraordinary bump after another is somehow going to get you over with the audience. All it's going to do is get your back broken. You can have a more see. Okay, I'm not going to go into a lot about like what I'm watching on the WWE, but I'm a huge Fandango fan. I'm just going to say that right now.
Hmm.
Fandango has a defined character. Tell me that when Fandango doesn't enter a room, as goofy as he is with the dancing gimmick, Fandango is Fandango. There's only one Fandango, and there will always be one Fandango. Karma, when she was in the WWE, that was a defined character. You were petrified when she came into that ring. You didn't know she was going to tear your head off. I don't know why. Somehow along the way, all the divas look alike and all the knockouts look alike. And all I see is a blonde in the same spandex, and I see a brunette and a redhead, and they're gorgeous. Some are tall, some are short, but basically they're all the same, except for Lana, who's kind of taking over like a Nanushka gimmick thing going on right now. At least she's going over big because she's decided to embrace a character all the way. You take that character all the way, you marry that character, and your audience is going to believe you're that character, and that's all you need. It's not rocket science. It's really basic nonverbal communication. I'm off my soapbox.
Listen, you can't patent that it's not rocket science because I say that 7 days a week.
Oh,
You want
okay.
you want to hear something interesting? I just had a little powwow, whatever you want to call it, with like 7 wrestlers in training in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
This is how simple it is. And it's everything that you're saying. And it's everything, by the way, just so you know, I get criticized for. Because, the wrestling purist, this isn't what they want wrestling to be. They want wrestling to be, 4-star, flip-flop and flying matches. They don't want wrestling to be glow. But basically, what I said is it's this easy, okay? The WWE gets hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tapes in a week.
Right.
People sit down and they look at those tapes. Now, they're seeing the same wrestling moves on those tapes over and over and over and over, performed by hundreds of different wrestlers.
Right.
What do you have within yourself that's different and unique? And you said it in the documentary and you said it again here. We all have a personality that we basically, whether it's a seed of our personality, whatever it is, we have to take that personality and then, we have to magnify that personality 1,000,000 times over. Now, what that does is that accomplishes a couple of things. First of all, there's not going to be another character like Angelina or Vince Russo. That's going to be unique to us. That's
Right.
going to be different from us. And basically, that's what's going to make you stand out and be different, is that character. And the second thing is, if you magnify the character, like you yourself said in the documentary, you don't have to go out there and act. You're a wrestler. You're not a professional actor. If you believe it, I don't have to act it. Therefore, the people are going to believe me. I've said this stuff till I'm blue in the face.
Yeah.
I'm hated for it because,
What?
the internet wrestling community, they want 4-star wrestling matches with Huna Conradis and this, that, and the other
Oh,
thing.
yeah. Yeah,
Characters, storylines are secondary. And you know what? If you don't have a character, if you don't have a storyline, you'll never draw a dime. It's
that's
that
right.
simple.
That's right. It's that simple. I've been to some indie matches and I've watched guys try and do pile drivers on concrete and I'm about ready to vomit because I am so petrified that they're going to get seriously hurt for what? For what? An ooh or an ah? When you can get an ooh or an ah from just selling, you know? If I don't know. It just seems to me that something so simple as character development seems to be so difficult for so many to understand. It just should.
Well,
It's not something that they. You said it's not acting. If you believe it, you go over. Period.
this is what I tell them all the time. But listen, the generation now, I used to call them the me generation. They're all entitled. They all don't need to work for anything. But I used to tell them exactly what you just said to me. Wouldn't you want to prolong your career
Yeah.
rather than go out there and break your neck every single night?
Right.
Wouldn't you rather have a character that literally you walk out to the ring and you're over? They'll pay Shawn Michaels until he's 65 years old to walk out to the ring to the Heartbreak Kid music. He'll
Yeah.
make a payday every day,
Yeah.
but yet these young,
Right.
thick-headed imbeciles don't want to listen. Listen, you get me all roughed up here. We got to get back to you. Now, the career was cut
Oh.
short. Yeah, it's all about you today. The career was cut short because you had some devastating injuries. And I want to talk about one. First, you tore both rotator cuffs, but I guess the one that really put you out of business was you blew out your ACL. And you said there was actually something wrong with the mat that night. And I was kind of interested to hear what happened and how did that happen?
Okay, so yeah, and I didn't tear both my rotator cuffs at the same time. It was just like when you're taking a bump and a girl throws you and you're landing sideways. Or like I've been thrown in the ropes, right? And my whole body moves forward, but my arm stays on the other side of the rope. And it's just over time, like those are the injuries I sustained, but I think I could have continued to work with that. I could have, that's something I could have still, that would have kept me in the business. But when I tore my ACL, uh, it was very profound because it didn't happen as a result of a move. I was putting a lot of time into my training and I was getting stronger as I went. And I was really proud of the work I was doing. But on match day, there was a separation in the mat. And we did not have a real wrestling ring. We were using a boxing ring with some foam pad. Okay.
Mhm.
And on the day that they assembled the ring, the guys, whoever assembled it, did not bring the mats together. And I'm a barefooted wrestler. And I went in for something so stupid, a headbutt. Okay, that's like the easiest. A headbutt in the turnbuckle to spike, and my heel catches a separation in the mat and blows out my ACL right there on the spot. And that was the end of my career. I tried to, I rehabbed it, and I worked really hard to try and get it stronger because I wanted to have this career that I thought I was going to retire from. I thought I was going to be a wrestler till I died. That didn't happen. But the whole story with the ACL is that you need your ACL. You need it to take bumps. I mean, you got to have these lateral movements, and if your leg's refusing to give you that support, you're done. You're done.
Angelina, based off of that, I have to ask you a question because I know to this day I suffer with it as well. And it has nothing to do with, the money and the glamour and the glitz and all that goes with wrestling. It has a lot to do with, the business and the industry was a big part of me. Now, you basically just said that, you planned and thought for the rest of your life you're going to be a wrestler. Now you're cut short because of injury. But on top of that, all of a sudden, after 4 seasons, G.L.O.W goes away. And from what I understand, a lot of the girls weren't contacted, weren't called, didn't see it coming. There's rumors that Rickless's wife, who was Pia Zadora, didn't like the fact that Rickless was hanging around with the G.L.O.W girls and made him get out of the business. That's part of the rumor. So maybe Pia Zadora killed G.L.O.W. I mean, who knows? But here you are on top of the world. You got a hit show. You're seen all over the world. Everybody knows you. You're making great cash at such a young age. Then all of a sudden, two things. Number one, a career-ending injury. And number two, even if you can make a comeback, G.L.O.W isn't there for you to come back to. At such a young age, how are you able to deal with that and not mentally and emotionally, get screwed up in the head from that?
So, Vince, it was mentally and emotionally very difficult for all of us. And some of us had better coping skills. And maybe this has to do with my childhood, although I wasn't happy about being thrown into different environments and having my life always, changing so radically. For me, it was like another transition in my life. But what I suffered with is very hard to explain unless you are in the industry. And I know that I've talked to my fellow wrestlers in different promotions that you do go through a post-traumatic stress because you just not only lost your job, you lost your family all in one. Like they're gone. No social media. There was no, hey, give me your phone number and your address. Let's stay in touch. I mean, it was just gone. We didn't know how to find each other. I mean, all we knew was, what happened to attaché, and where's the California? I mean, how do I find California doll in the registry? How do I find Palestina? It just doesn't happen. So it was very, very difficult to lose your family and your livelihood all at once, and that was something that we all struggled with. And it was something that I know that is still relevant in the industry today. And so I'm extremely passionate about helping young wrestlers create a transition when their time comes, because we have a short shelf life in this industry. We do not know when our expiration date is going to come up. There is no guarantee for anything in this business. But there is, if you're smart and you create multiple streams of income, if you create a plan B, a really effective plan B, if you understand that this business will continue to give back to you even if you're not in the ring, if you have that mentality of giving instead of receiving, then this business is going to be a blessing in your life. But if it was all about how much airtime you had and that this was going to somehow launch you to stardom and you're going to be in that 1/2 of 1% of wrestlers that actually make it on screen, and you're going to be on the cover of magazines, and this is how, and you're going to end up being the Hulk Hogan of female wrestling, or whatever's going through your head. And if you continue to crave the glory that wrestling gives you, you're never going to be able to replace that. And then you're going to buy into stories that someone could tell you. Like, not every promoter is a good promoter in this industry. We're not a regulated industry. That breaks my heart. So one of the things that I saw happening was that there was a segment of women that were able to see G.L.O.W as a great opportunity and something that was part of their lives, and that they embraced it and they were blessed by it, and they continued to move forward in their journey. And then there was some women that lingered waiting for the next best thing, or they couldn't understand why the phone wasn't ringing, or they continued to watch themselves age and get older and feel like they have no value because they put all their eggs into some superficial basket of glory instead of seeing what wrestling should have really been about for them. And that's just a dynamic with me. I feel really blessed that I was able to look at my career in wrestling as a great opportunity, as something that I'll have with me forever. And the fact that I get to give back now is full circle. That this is an industry that, is a family. We're a family here, and I embrace everybody that wants to come into my world and call me Little Egypt. I think it's an honor.
That's some really great advice, and that's just a really good insight. I mean, I enjoyed listening to that, and I took something from that. I have to ask you this, and this is a funny story, and I think you're going to get a kick out of this. I want to ask you, as we wrap this up, if once you rehabbed and once you were okay, if you ever had, even if for a day or for a week or whatever it was, an ambition of trying out for the WWE. And I got to tell you a funny story, man. When I was writing for the WWE, and Ivory, Lisa Moretti, came in and did a she was a fringe player. I don't know if I don't think she was one of the Godfather's girls, but
Yeah,
she came in a very minimal role. And
right.
I can remember watching her, and there was just something about the way she carried herself. And she was such a pro, like she had been doing this her entire life.
Yep.
As much as a glow mark that I was, I didn't put two and two together. I didn't know she was Tina Ferrari. I had no idea. So the success that she achieved at the WWE, she achieved as Ivory. I didn't even know Tina Ferrari. But again, it was because she came in as such a professional and was so different than everybody else. And I knew this girl's special. And, she did go on to become the WWE Women's Champion. Did you ever have that, in passing after you were, rehabbed and the knee was okay? Did you contemplate that at all?
Okay, so my knee never was okay. I never had surgery on it. And so I just wrote off my career. I was like, I had a chance to be a manager for Palestina for a while. Seriously, that was only going to take me another couple years if I was lucky. And I'm a realist. I went into the real estate market early, and I built an incredible real estate business, and enjoyed the benefits of time and money and freedom. So that was like my story. But let me go back to Lisa Moretti, who gives our work so much credibility in the industry. I can't even tell you. And I'm so happy to hear everything that you just said. Vince, let me ask you one question. Why is she not in the WWE Hall of Fame as a three-time WWE
Oh,
champion? And when you have a history and a legacy that goes beyond just showing up at the WWE, when you can actually track her career as a milestone in female history, why the hell is she not on the table?
because it's so sad, the politics that play into that WWE Hall of Fame. You know what I say, Angelina? This is what I say, right? You just said it beautifully. You know what every athlete goes to after they've wrestled their last match.
Right.
They all go through it. I went through it. You went through it. I'm no question, Lisa Moretti has gone through it. They all go through it. My thing is, if you've been in a WWE ring, put them in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
If
right?
for one last
Yeah.
time you can put somebody high up on a pedestal and
Yep.
tell them how great they were, and the lives they touched, and the millions of fans that they had, for one last hurrah, put everybody in the Hall of Fame. But who goes in and who doesn't go in is one of life's greatest mysteries. What my mystery is, I put this Lisa Moretti, this Ivory that I fall in love with, on television. I call her because I want to do this reunion. I want her to be a part of this. She's got some dog grooming business now, I think in Seattle, Washington or
Yeah.
something. I
Yeah.
leave a beautiful message for this Lisa Moretti. She doesn't return my phone call.
Oh, Lisa. And you know what? Let me tell you something about Lisa. She loves the sport. She loves being an advocate for women. She knows she has a voice, but she also doesn't have a lot of time to invest in giving this sport maybe her talents. But I will tell you this, she is involved in the Cauliflower Alley Club,
Mm-hmm.
that she most likely will be there next year, that she knows that in that environment, that's where she wants to be. She wants to be a voice. She wants to be a role model. She wants to be um, able to share in that arena, but she doesn't like to do the circuit. She doesn't like to take time away from her job. But once a year for 3 days, she can get together with her Glow sisters, some of her wrestling sisters, have a great reunion, and be able to give back at that time. That's how she manages it, unfortunately.
Well, just so you know, I get so fed up with the Hall of Fame that this is a shoot. Now, there is a Pyro and Ballyhoo Hall of Fame, and China was my first inductee into the Pyro and Ballyhoo Hall of Fame. And I'm going to get Ivory in there, and I'm going to get her on the show so she can accept the award. I got to ask you something. You just said now 3 days. So is there a Glow reunion every year?
So we have converted the Cauliflower Alley Club as a venue for not only us to appreciate the work that's been done in the industry and the people that are getting acknowledged, but we also see it as a great way for all of us to get together. We'll celebrate at the banquets together. We'll be in the nostalgia room signing autographs and connecting with the fan base. And at the same time, we're going out as girls and we're back in Las Vegas and we're just reliving the old days, and it's the absolute best. And we're connecting with girls that we haven't really gotten to know very well, are now full-on sisters with us, even though we weren't in the same rooms together and we didn't have the same seasons together. We share the same stories. We know what it was like. We were in the pressure cooker together, so that gives us, like, we were on the battlefields, maybe not at the same time, but our stories are similar. So that's why we do the Cauliflower Alley Club.
Do you think there'll ever be a straight up Glow reunion like we see in the documentary?
So we had our first ever Afterglow party. I don't know if you saw that, but it was in Los Angeles at the Acme Comedy Theater, and it was just a few weeks ago. It was a brainchild of Roxy Astor. She wanted an opportunity to give back to the fans. And so she created a Kickstarter campaign, and she raised the funds to rent the theater, to videotape it, set a stage, and put us up there in like a Phil Donahue kind of style.
Mm-hmm.
Except for, instead of Phil Donahue, the fans got to be on the hot seat and give us their testimonials, as well as ask us whatever question they wanted to ask us. And so it became like a really interesting way to have a reunion with our fan base. I don't think I've ever seen anyone make the fan the center, but they should be, because they're the ones that pay our bills. So it was great hearing like where these fans came from and the impact that Glow made on them as children. A lot of them talked about being bullied and finding empowerment. A lot of people thought, well, if these women can go out there and face ridicule, if these women can go out there and be who they are, regardless of what anyone thought of them, then that was a message. And that was part of the Glow brand. And that was part of the belief. Like, Glow doesn't just stand for Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling. When you identify Glow, and I think when people ask me, why do you think there's never been another Glow product? Or there's been a lot of stuff that surfaced with all female wrestling, and there's some good stuff going on with David McLean and the way he's playing out. Wow. All that stuff's fantastic, and I'm so happy for the girls in the industry that they have a venue to get paid. Okay, my biggest thing is, like, let's keep these girls working. So the more venues, the better it is for the girls in the industry. But Glow is beyond wrestling. It's the belief that women of all ages and shapes and sizes can get in a wrestling ring and be who they are, regardless if they have skill, regardless if they regardless of whatever it is that they're bringing to the table in the ring. Everybody is a gorgeous lady of wrestling. Everybody who steps in that ring, that purple ring with the pink ropes, remember when I talked about the nonverbal belief that connects with the audience? Well, that's why Glow connected with such a big fan base, because they weren't watching Glow because they thought it was a good wrestling show. They were watching Glow because we were so extraordinary with character development and the way that we portrayed women and empowered women, and men who were watching the show also were empowered, that if we could do something, they could do something.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my story.
Where can we find that? Is that on YouTube? Is that anywhere for us to see? Can we buy it? Where can we see that?
What are you talking about? The
The theater that just took place.
Oh, the okay. So you can actually go on YouTube and pull up Afterglow Party, and you'll see several segments. And I think Roxy is going to be putting together maybe an IPPV, an internet pay-per-view, maybe for the people that didn't get a chance to see it. But there's enough clips out there that it'll give you a taste of what it was that we did. And frankly, I think we should do more of those. I mean, that was a huge success. And it wasn't a success because we got to hear ourselves talk. It was a huge success because we got to hear from the fans who told us the impact that G.L.O.W was making on their lives. And that is what empowers other people who are watching the show.
You know,
Not what comes out of our mouth, but what comes out of the fans' mouth.
it's funny. I was just consulting at TNA, for about 10 months. And there's a guy there now, great guy, but he's in charge of creative and management and all that. His name is John Gaborik. And what happens, Angelina, is these guys start getting convinced that people want more wrestling because the internet wrestling community has the loudest voice, and they're the ones that want more wrestling. So as I was working more and more with John, I could see he was getting more and more towards wrestling instead of entertainment. And I swear to you, I recommended, I said, John, you need to go on Netflix and you need to watch the G.L.O.W documentary. And everybody, if you're a wrestling fan, you need to watch that documentary on G.L.O.W. These were non-workers. These were pretty girls that were trained to wrestle that were drawing over 6 million people a week by merely entertaining the masses. And we've gotten so far away from that, it's not even funny. That's why I'm glad we can have this discussion. And one last thing before I let you go, Angelina, I want to wrap it up because you came full circle. Finally, after all these years where we started the interview, you published your cookbook, the Melting Pot Cookbook. Is that true?
Yeah, the Great American Melting Pot. Now you got me stumbling on my words. The Great American Melting Pot was a book that I had written, believe it or not, for the Turkish culture and the Turkish community, because I'm so empowered by creating a better relationship between the mindsets of the Turkish people with the American mindset and the American mindset with the Turkish mindset. And I don't want to get on my soapbox and preach about secularism and empowering and all that. But one of the things that I noticed while living abroad is that people would be they watch our television shows, they watch our movies, and they wonder what it is that why do we eat fried chicken? And what's that pizza all about? And why do you have to eat it like that? And I don't understand. That doesn't make sense. It's not what we do. And so they just write it off. But when they start looking at the journey of where our food comes from, and I'm not going, for example, like chicken fried steak, originated in Texas, and it's like one of their go-to meals. But what's interesting about that is that the whole part of actually frying meat in flour came through by way of the Dutch immigration in the 1600s. And so because the Dutch and the German immigrants that were living in that area, who also did a lot of Wiener Schnitzel and didn't have chance to get veal or pork, ended up using the next best piece of meat that they could find, and that would be steak. And so the concept was there, and then the American flavor of adding the gravy with the mashed potatoes. And so when I talk about the recipes in this book, I am actually talking about an experience of culture, and it does become a great American melting pot. We are the only country in the world that has our recipes defined by immigration, where in other countries, their culinary cuisine is based on the culture that stemmed from hundreds and hundreds of years. And the United States, being such a young country, we have this incredible palette of different cuisines and how certain things originate. That's what's fascinating to me. And that comes from traveling and being just being aware and enjoying food. And that's, and I started working on my next book, which is not published, but it's, my favorite Mediterranean dishes and stuff that I've created over the years. I love cooking.
Yeah, I can see that, and I love eating. Well, Angelina, listen, this has been such a treat for me. As I said, listen, I tell everybody who'll listen to me, Glow really had an influence on how I wrote the Attitude Era in the WWE. The characters and the storylines and the pageantry. It had a big impact on me, and I just want to thank you for bringing that product to us, and I want to thank you for this interview today. Now, listen, if the fans want to stay in contact with you, I know you have a Twitter account and a Facebook. Can you please give that to them so they know where to find you?
Okay, first of all, thank you, Vince, for having me on the show. And the Attitude Era is my favorite era, so I loved everything that you did. To think that you were influenced by Glow and what we were bringing to the table is a huge compliment. I wish that more people in the industry uh, recognize the work that we did outside of like the campy realm, and that one day, Glow will have a place in wrestling history, which we do not have at this point. We're not recognized in the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame. We are slowly becoming recognized with the Cauliflower Alley Club, and slowly through interviews like this, one at a time, it helps create an understanding in the industry that the work we did was viable, that you can make money in the female division. For those of you who enjoy connecting with me, you can find me on Twitter at Little Egypt. Super easy. I have like the best name on Twitter. And then Facebook, you have to find me under Glow, my first name, Little Egypt, my second name, or my page, the official page of Little Egypt. Either way, you connect with me and you're going to connect with the Glow family, because I've made it my mission to make sure that if there's a girl out there that wants to connect with the fan base, that I'm going to be able to direct them to you. So make sure that you friend me, and then I will go ahead and find you who it is that you're looking for.
And Angelina, the same goes for this show. If there's any girls that want to come on this show, please let me know. They'll be welcomed with open arms. I cannot and again, when you talk about Glow not being recognized by professional wrestling, who cares? It's recognized by the fans. And you said it earlier in the interview. That's the most important thing. And everybody who was ever witness to that show, the 6 million people you drew every single week, those people did not forget. And that is the testament of time. And I am here to speak for that. But again, I want to thank you very, very much. And I look forward to having you on the show again.
Thank you so much. I feel blessed to be a part of it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.